Boker Tov, everybody. Good morning. I'm Rabbi Dan Feder, and welcome to Peninsula Temple Shalom. And along with my colleagues, Rabbi Julia Berg, Cantor Yonah Klieger, we are so happy to welcome everybody to our synagogue for a wonderful opportunity to learn with Rabbi Dr. Shmuly Yanklowitz about a really important topic. How do we live in contemporary society with a healthy relationship to truth and ethics and technology? It is one of the pressing moral issues of our time, and how we respond to the call is going to be a big part of the legacy in the world that we create and leave for the generations that follow us. So, welcome. We're here for something important, and it's been a great 5 days with Shmuly. If you have been at the JCC or at different synagogues, you know what a fascinating person he is, what a great model of an engaged, ethical learner and leader he is, and the interesting conversations we can have with them. We have this opportunity because this is actually our 15th year on the North Peninsula of collaborating to bring a wonderful educator to our community to teach people of all ages over an extended period of time. And during that time, we've brought some really incredible examples of Jewish teachers and leaders who have shared so much with us over the years. And Shmuly is yet another great, great educator, and maybe the best that we've had. It's the opportunities I've had to learn with him, both at National Rabbis Conferences about a week and a half ago on Zoom with the rabbis on the North Peninsula, and just this past Thursday has been great. So I want to thank all the different philanthropic sources that have made this week possible. So this is a collaboration, just so you know, of the Peninsula Jewish Community Center, the Warnock Jewish Day School, Peninsula Temple Bethel, Peninsula Temple Shalom, Peninsula Sinai Congregation, Congregation Beth Jacob in Redwood City, and Coastside Jewish Community in Half Moon Bay. Also, this is coordinated by the spiritual leader of the Peninsula JCC, Lori Matzkin. So a shout out to Lori for her leadership and coordination. And it's also due to these philanthropies: the Toby Philanthropies, the Corette Foundation, the Coombe Family Foundation, the Jewish Federation of the Bay Area, as well as individual partners across the Bay Area. And last and not least, our special co-sponsor, the Hebrew Free Loan Association, which has done such vital work in the extended Jewish community for, I'm guessing, 129 years. And a lot of people have gotten where they are in life because of the HFLA. And this is a really important organization for really the whole community to be aware of, to be able to talk about with other people, because so many people, particularly in 2026, could use financial support. It's important that we are able to connect people to the help that they can get from the Hebrew Free Loan Association, but also so that we can contribute to it, so we can continue to support people and organizations. So I want to invite Cindy Rogaway to say a few words, the executive director of the Hebrew Free Loan.
Thank you. Well, nice to meet all of you. I won't speak long, and Rabbi Feder just basically told you so much of what's important. We have been operating for over 129 years now. We were founded by some people here in San Francisco, but we cover all of Northern California. And we were started with just a few quarters being put into a pushka, because it says in the Torah that God tells Moses that you shouldn't charge interest, that you shouldn't benefit from another person's troubles. So we are continuing that tradition this many years later. Today we have a few more quarters in the Pushka. We actually have out in the community helping nearly 1,800 people with close to $22.5 million. So every year we're giving out about $8 million these days, might be $9 million this year, to help people whether they need to buy a used car to get to work or to get out of debt, credit card debt with really high interest that you wouldn't believe if you haven't seen it yourself, and to help people who are undergoing fertility treatment or buying their first home, just about anything you can imagine that somebody might need help with. The idea is to help people live their best life by making sure that finances are not a barrier. So we're very proud to support this effort. It's been a joy to hear the rabbis speak at a few events already. And I want to just encourage all of you to think about people you know, or when someone comes to you and says they're having some trouble financially, send them our way. We'll be happy to help. And if you're in a position to support our work, we appreciate that as well. I see many, many donors to us sitting in the room. So thank you very much. I think you're in for a treat hearing the rabbi. I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
So, Rabbi Yanklowitz comes to us from Scottsdale, Arizona, and frankly, I don't know how he goes to work in March. If I were in Scottsdale in March, I'd be at the ballpark, so I think it's exemplary that you're able to do your work. So he's involved in a lot of issues. He's not just involved in these issues, he's founded these organizations, Uri Letzedek, Orthodox Social Justice, Shamayim, the Jewish Animal Advocacy, Yatom, the Jewish Foster and Adoption Network, and all of these are rooted in the conviction that spiritual life isn't meant to stay in the realm of ideas, but that it must lead to courageous action in the whole world. And that's, I think, why all of us are here. We may not have articulated it to ourselves that way, but that's why we do what we do. As a scholar, he holds a doctorate from Harvard University, received rabbinic ordination from Yeshivat Chovevei Torah. He's authored no less than 30 books on Jewish ethics and spirituality. His writing appears everywhere, and his backstory is so interesting that if he doesn't talk about it, find a way to ask him about it before he leaves this campus. I'd like to introduce Rabbi Dr. Shmuly Yanklowitz, and we're in for a treat. Shmuly.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be with you and in this beautiful sanctuary with these wonderful people. And I'm so grateful to all the organizers and funders and collaborators, because not every Jewish community collaborates. It's an amazing thing, actually, how collaborative this community is. No, really, it's something to be so proud of. I have lived in many communities where you don't collaborate. There's a scarcity of resources and trust. And so when we engage with technology, I love this mic system. This is great. When we engage with technology, the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what do I awaken within myself? Am I opening my mind? Am I opening my heart? Am I opening my soul? But soul is a bad word, because in English, we have this singular thing called a soul, right? But in Judaism, you don't have one soul, but five, right? Or at least 5 levels of soul. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. So I want to sing a little nigun together. If you know it, you'll join me. If you don't, you'll learn it. And I invite you to say, which aspect of soul am I going to awaken as we explore this topic? Because that's always the first question of, what am I opening in me before I open up a device in front of me? Okay? Ha-nine, a-nine, nine, a-nine, a-nine, and a nine, a nine, ha-nine, a-nine. So, I was in Las Vegas a week ago with my daughter, my 7th grade daughter, who has only recently learned the art of eye rolling. And we go to the Las Vegas sign. You know the sign, the welcome sign? Like if you do anything in Las Vegas besides lose all your money, you go to the sign to take your picture to show that you were at the sign, And I was so upset because there was about an hour wait to, get to the sign to take our picture. Oh, we got to wait an hour. And my daughter does her eye roll and says, why would we wait an hour? I'm like, because we want the picture with the sign. And we have to wait for the people in front to be gone. And she's like, no, we're going to stand here at the back of the line, and we're going to take the picture, and we're going to edit out all the people in front of us in the line. And I'm like, doofuses, those doofuses don't know that, right? And I'm standing there, so we take the picture in front of the sign and edit out all these people, and it was a reminder of just how much as a 13-year-old, she knows that I don't know about things that ought to be obvious and easy to know. But the generational shifts are actually very interesting, because if you look at boomers, baby boomers, all the way through Gen X, through millennials, through Gen Z, through Alpha, we used to say that generations shifted every 15 to 20 years. Now, people who think about generational shifts say it's about every 7 years that generations shift. And what did we think leads to a generational shift? What we thought, and the stories we tell about our lives, are about major world events. Oh, I was alive in World War II, or I was a soldier in Vietnam, or I remember 9/11, right? We think it's these events in society that determine what generation we're in. But the scholars who think about generations say it's not that at all. It's primarily the new technologies that emerge that change the way we live. By technologies, I don't just mean apps, of course. I mean things like washing machines and dishwashers, right? And how cars evolved, and things that change fundamentally how we spend our time. And that's where we are now. That's where we are now, where if it's 7 years now, I don't know what it's going to be in a few years from now at the pace of change that's occurring. And the major disruptions in the workplace are yet to come, although they've certainly begun. But I think the opening question I want to ask is, do we care? Do we care about any of this? I mean, is this just entertainment, or do I really care about the ethics of truth as it relates to technology? And I think for most people, they'd say they don't care. We're in a post-truth era. Truth, like who cares? Like I just want to be happy, have a good time. I just want to use tools that make my life easier and better, and I work less hard, and but truth? Are we willing to fight for truth? Does that even matter, or do we only care if it affects my life? So let me start with this story about whether we should care at all. A young man came to the Hasidic teacher. His name was Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kutsk, known as the Kutzker Rebbe, in the 19th century. And he said he lost his faith and he couldn't believe anymore. The Rebbe didn't reject him, he didn't castigate him, but gently looked in his eyes and asked, "Why, my son? Why have you lost your faith?" The young man said, "The world is full of so much suffering and so much pain and corruption and deceit. I can't believe there is a giving and loving God left in this world." The Rebbe looked at him deeply in the eyes and said, yes, there is suffering and there's pain beyond imagination in this world. But do you care? The young man said, "Yes, of course I care. How could I not care? How can one walk the streets and see the homeless and see the sick in pain and not care?" The Rebbe looked more deeply into his eyes. "But why do you care? Why do you care?" The boy began to weep. "I care because I need to care, because my humanity's at stake, because somebody needs to care." The Rebbe looked even more deeply into his student's eyes and heart. "But why do you care?" Now the boy just lost it. He lost it, and he cried so hard. He said, Rebbe, when those in pain cry out to heaven, someone has to hear their cry. Someone in the universe needs to hear them. And I'm the ears that hear. I have to care. The Rebbe now embraced this boy. If you care that much, then God exists. If you care that much, then God is real. If you care that much, then God lives in this world. I think that part of what's at stake is that we get to choose what kind of universe we want to live in. We get to determine what we ultimately believe. We get to determine if we believe this is a good universe, if we think we have any power over death or over evil, hope against despair, if love can exist over hate, if truth has any power over lies. And I think the question for us is, do we actually care enough about the pursuit of truth? And tech can actually dull us from caring. Because normally we would morally reason, we would be up at night reasoning through moral dilemmas and challenges. But more and more people are giving these decisions over to machines to make for themselves. And losing a fundamental capacity that makes us human. Now, what makes us human is crucial here, because in transhumanism, what is being explored in human enhancement is fundamentally shifting what makes us human, right? If we put chips in human brains to alter our humanity in the name of human flourishing, we're going to have to ask the question, what makes us fundamentally human? What are we willing to change and what are we not? Are we willing to change the capacity for memory to prevent dementia? Are we willing to address autism and address trauma through altering the brain? What if we think people can flourish even more if we remove moral agency? We add a chip that actually enhances the brain to make moral decisions without their own sort of free will. And what's at stake here also, I think fundamentally one of the things that makes us human is our capacity for empathy, our God-like ability to look in a person's eyes and imagine how they care in a way that has some accuracy. We've gained the emotional intelligence to see the hidden person, right? To see their tears and have the ability to imagine what they're feeling. We don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose that. Now, the conversation around truth is one that is going to be about the external technologies we're developing. But I think it starts within us. There's 3 mitzvot to light candles. What is the most important one? Shabbat candles. That is a biblical mitzvah to light Shabbat candles. People who have fully embraced egalitarianism don't care if men do this or women do that, but traditionally, men brought in Shabbat through Kiddush, and women brought in Shabbat through candle lighting for the family. And so it was usually identified as something that women did on behalf of families. And this mitzvah, what's the purpose of this mitzvah, to light candles? The Talmud says, shalom bayit, peace in the home, right? Why would it be peace in the home? Well, the house would be dark otherwise, right? So part of peace is seeing each other, right? The scariest plague, well, maybe the second scariest, in the plagues is the plague of darkness, because it says nobody could see each other anymore, right? The lost capacity for empathy. So the first mitzvah to light candles of a biblical origin is Shabbat, and the reason is peace in the home. If I asked a Gentile in the streets, when do Jews light candles, what would they say? Hanukkah! It must be our most important holiday because it coincides with Christmas. I'm not the type to put down holidays, but I would call it a minor holiday rather than a major one, even though people trying to sell us stuff want to make it a major one so that we can commercialize and this holiday and just buy tons of stuff and try to convince Jewish kids to stay Jewish because they get presents even more than on Christmas or something like this. But what is the reason for Hanukkah lighting? Why do you light the menorah? Persume nisa, to publicize the miracle externally, right? It used to be that you lit the Chanukiah in the public sphere, right? But due to persecution, we stopped doing that, except Chabad, and we started putting a little rinky-dink on our little table in the living room, and that was our attempt to publicize the miracle. Actually, I've got a rabbi friend with a lot of shtick, and he's one of these guys who has a huge menorah on top of his minivan every Hanukkah, driving down the road. Now, one night there was a robber in his neighborhood, and the robber could have chosen the 1987 brown Buick or my friend's minivan with a menorah on top. He wasn't the most clever robber, so he chose my friend's car. My friend calls the police, says, "Someone stole my car." He says, "What does it look like?" "There's a menorah on top of it." They find the guy 10 minutes down the road, pretty quickly. So the reason for this mitzvah is publicizing the miracle outwards. What's the third mitzvah of lighting candles? Don't say yahrzeit. It's a nice minhag, but not a mitzvah. That's why we don't make a bracha when we light a yahrzeit candle. Yes, havdalah. And one of the requirements is that the wicks are intertwined, right? Which is to say that Shabbat candles are about looking inwards into the home, right? Peace in the home. Shabbat candles look inwards. Hanukkah candles are about looking outwards to society. Havdalah candles are at the intersection of Shabbat and weekday, private life and public life, inner life and outer life, intertwined wick. Shabbat candles looking inwards, Hanukkah candles looking outwards, Havdalah candles intertwining these. And I think those Havdalah candles are a good symbol of what we're talking about. That if we care about truth out there, then we have to care about truth in here. So how will we live that, and how will we model that as we pursue technological advancements? Now, if there's any app I hope you leave today putting on your phone, it's called Safaria, because Safaria is now a wonderful way, and they don't pay me to say this, although I wouldn't mind a cut, is a wonderful way to have access to all Jewish literature throughout all time on your phone, right? In a moment, you have Tanakh, and you have the Talmud, and you have all the sources in a moment. And translated very well. And so it says in Pirkei Avot 5:15, and if you're someone who takes seriously how we digest information, this is something you might tape next to your laptop. It says there's 4 types among those who sit before the sages: a sponge, a funnel, a strainer, and a sieve. A sponge soaks up everything, right? This is a foolish approach, right? This is a childish approach, not putting down children, but this is how my children come home from school. They soak up everything, for good and for bad. The good behaviors of friends, the bad behaviors of friends, the things that are true, the things that aren't true. They bring everything home at a certain age. The sponge soaks up everything. That's something that's not ideal. Then there's the funnel. The funnel takes in at one end and lets out the other end, right? This is the one who actually, as opposed to soaking everything up, doesn't internalize anything. It goes in and goes out. It's what they often say in rabbinical school. I don't care how many times you've gone through the Talmud. I care how many times the Talmud has gone through you, right? So the second is where nothing remains. The third is the strainer, which lets out the wine and retains the lees. What are lees? Anybody say? Okay. What's the Hebrew there? The Hebrew there is hayayin v'koletet et hashmarim, right? Interesting. And then lastly, the ideal is the sieve, right? Like when I grew up, if my father called me a sieve, that was a negative thing. But it says a sieve which lets out the coarse meal and retains the choice flour, right? So the model is to ensure the negative goes out, but we retain the good. And like many things in technology, it is neither inherently good nor bad. It depends on what we will ultimately do with it. Now, when we talk about the ethics of technology, let me just name some of the many categories we're not going to touch on. Or maybe we will if you go there. And I'm going to pause in a moment for questions, thoughts, and pushback. The first is biotechnology and medical ethics as it relates to genetic editing, as it relates to human enhancement. The human enhancement is what we just touched upon with transhumanism and what we want to enhance and what we're willing to safeguard. A lot of that question, again, is about what makes us B'Tselem Elohim, what makes us in the image of God. Because there's a raging debate about that. Raging. People who are a part of raging, rabbinic debates. Which is, according to some, it's our unkelis, it's our capacity for speech that makes us human. But we know other animals have capacity for speech. For some, it's cognition, right? But we know other non-human animals also have capacity for cognition. And we also know that we don't want a human who lacks a certain capacity to be considered subhuman, God forbid, right? Someone who has a lower cognition, someone who can't speak, right? So that's part of the calculus also. According to the Maharal, what makes us human is freedom, the freedom to choose. So there's about 10 different suggestions about what makes us different from angels on the one hand, and what makes us different from animals on the other hand. What makes us uniquely human and uniquely in the image of God, and that gives birth to human rights. The fact that we have that capacity is what makes human rights different than animal rights. Okay, so that's biotech and medical tech. Then there's the AI ethics, which we may touch upon. There's the issues of data privacy and data protection. There's cybersecurity ethics, and as it relates to ethical hacking. There's algorithmic fairness and bias. This is emerging a lot more and more around biases around hiring, for example, and selection criteria at schools, where people used to actually read and review certain applications, and now they go through a system. There's tech governance and regulation. There's digital rights and digital freedoms. In the environmental and sustainability ethics questions. And then the big one we're going to talk about today, especially if people here have kids or grandkids that they're worried about, as we should be, which are the human-tech interaction ethics, as it relates to addictive platforms, designed to be addictive platforms, as it relates to psychological effects of use, as it relates to human autonomy and dependency. And lastly, and I think in some ways one of the most interesting and relevant, is military technology ethics. In the Gaza war, AI was used heavily to identify where to bomb. Yes, occasionally you had IDF troops knocking on houses. In fact, there was a guy who stayed at my house this last summer because he needed his 27th surgery from his leg being blown up by a rimon. Rimon in Hebrew means pomegranate, but it also means grenade, right? Because a grenade is like a pomegranate with lots of seeds. So he was hit by a rimon, and he needed all these. He's actually, if you've ever heard of Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, is his grandson. That's how he ended up staying at my house. And he talked about what it meant to knock on doors, and what it meant not knowing what's on the other side of the door. So sometimes it looks like that, and sometimes it looks like use of AI, which again is really complicated given the combatant and civilian distinction and the difficulty of drawing those lines in such a complicated war. And AI attempts to identify who the key actors are and identify their locations, so to reduce casualties. In any case, those are some of the areas. And if we go back to, so in ethics, there's really three categories in moral philosophy. There is deontology. Deontology emerges from Immanuel Kant and basically says ethics is about duties. So he has something called the categorical imperative, where he says we should only do that which, if everyone did what I do, it would be justifiable, right? So there's many things I love about Israel. The thing I like the least is how it works to stand in a line, right? You ever stood in a line in Israel? Because all of a sudden, the person right behind you is kind of right in front of you. Like, what's going on here? And they don't even think it's abnormal. They're not. You're like looking at the guy. Like, don't you think this is a little weird? I can't see you. And all of a sudden, and then there's another person right in front of you. What's going on here? You know? So the idea of line cutting. If we all cut lines, where are we gonna end up? But the categorical imperative is an interesting experiment. Now, where Kant gets it wrong is he thinks that that these rules and duties should always apply. So truth is so important, you should not lie. Well, Judaism would reject that. Judaism embraces lying. Lying can be really important because there are values more important than truth, right? That's really difficult to determine. Actually, one of the comical and offensive cases in the Talmud of how dignity is more important than truth is the rabbis say, you should always tell the bride she's beautiful. It doesn't matter what you think, you tell the bride she's beautiful because the dignity of the bride matters more than whatever your truth is. Now, one of the commentators says it's not a lie because the groom thinks she's the most beautiful person in the room. And so you are speaking his truth, right? So there's cases like that. But where else is Kant wrong? If a Nazi knocks on your door in 1944 and says, is there a Jew in your basement? The ethical thing to do, well, not that everyone would be required to do this because you might give up your life, but the ethical thing to do would be to choose the value of saving life over the value of truth and say, no, there's no Jews in my basement, right? So anyways, Kant is about duties and obligations. Then there is consequentialism or utilitarianism, which says what matters not is the duty of what's right, but the impact, right? The result. If I could save 5 lives instead of saving 1 life, I would do that. So in the conversations of the right to die, I know many people think about these types of things. That's not one of our topics this week. But if you invite me in 10 years when everyone forgot what I said, then maybe we'll talk about the right to die and euthanasia and these types of things. According to a deontologist, they would say, no, you cannot murder. And so ending a life prematurely, regardless of pain or suffering, would be a wrong. Whereas a utilitarian says, no, this is about suffering and pleasure. And if the person is suffering so much, shouldn't they have the right, based upon consequentialism, to make such a choice? And then the third category of ethics is called virtue ethics, which means the lens is not duty or consequence. The lens is character. What character traits do you bring to this moral dilemma and help you to decide what to do at this point? So I offer that as a way, as a framework for thinking through some of the decisions. Okay, we're now going to pass around some sources, and while that's happening, I want to pause for questions or thoughts or pushback on anything I've said. Yes, please. Yes.
Funnels are very useful. Funnel says, here, you got this pouring out of the bottle here. You want to get it into this little tube here so that it goes exactly where you want it to go. So how about we make our kids into funnels in the AI?
Okay, good. That's a new read of Pirkei Avot. I think their assumption is that there's not the bottle below where we retain what we want to retain, but that it just goes out into the sea, you know? It just goes, it's almost like through the ear, like it funnels through the ear, back through the other ear. Is that your assumption when you read the text?
Well, I think that, then use just a pipe, but a funnel is a very specific, and
right.
Is a useful
right.
tool. A sponge is a useful tool.
Yeah.
A funnel is a useful tool.
Right.
A sieve is a useful tool.
Great.
Say like 3 of them are not good, and one of them is really the one
yeah.
is missing what the tool is useful.
Okay, good. I think that's a really nice interpretation of that Pirkei Avot, and that in different educational settings, we want different tools. And maybe to be explicit about that, we're now in a sponge space. We're going to go into the Holocaust Museum, and we want you to be a sponge. We're now going to this immersive experience as a sponge. And in other cases, we want to be, more selective. So I really appreciate that, thinking about different tools. Okay, thank you. All right, so I want to, yes, please, yeah. Okay, we're short. Okay, that's a good problem to have. Yes, please, yeah.
When you're talking about truth, I keep thinking about alternative facts. You know, the idea that it's a political thing that came up, but who are you talking about?
Great, yes. So truth is under attack and on many levels, and also in the fact that we don't have a shared language anymore for truth on so many fronts, or even a shared desire. You know, I shared on Wednesday, and I want to share it again, given how important it is to me, that I think there's two, epistemologically, in the study of knowledge, I think there's two main threats to society today. And the first is the fundamentalist. The fundamentalist is sure they have the truth, and they want to impose the truth upon everyone else, right? I have the facts, you don't have the facts. Everything that's outside of my facts is fake news or alternative facts. There's every type of fundamentalist. There's Muslim fundamentalists, there's Christian fundamentalists, there's Jewish fundamentalists, there's atheists and scientific fundamentalists who basically think they have it all and the other is a fool. These are dangerous people who don't understand the humility of not knowing or the relativity of truth. On the other hand is the more scary person in my view, which is the radical relativist. The radical relativist says truth is so complicated that I don't know anything. In the name of false humility, what do I know? Life is about happiness. Have a good time. There's nothing worth fighting for. There's nothing worth knowing because we don't know anything. And I think this image is best captured in the sneh and nenu ukal, the burning bush that is not consumed. Because the fundamentalist is so on fire, they burn everyone around them. The relativist has no fire at all, right? The burning bush that is not consumed is a beautiful prophetic model for what it means to be on fire for moral truth, but not burn out and not burn others, right? And that's a model in the pursuit of truth to consider, to say, how do we create... Now, Moshe missed the burning bush. At least according to some of the commentators, he missed it. It was burning right in front of his eyes, and he couldn't even see it, right? That's why we started with the nigun. It took the capacity to see before he could see. So the whole story of the Kutzker Rebbe of do we really care is part of the question of like, do I actually want to see? Or do I, based on confirmation bias, only use tech to reaffirm what I want to be told? Do I actually want to be challenged? Do I want to learn? Do I want to grow? My favorite trait in Musar, in the spiritual and ethical development movement, when I say my favorite, I probably say that about 10 of them, but today my favorite is called Hitzlamdut. Hitzlamdut means every moment is a learning opportunity. Something good happens, something bad happens, it's a learning opportunity. I don't just judge it. Oh, that's good, that's bad. Whatever happens, I'm curious. And when I meet a person, I flip judgment into curiosity. Oh, I'm so curious about you. I'm so curious about this moment. Oh, I just got a diagnosis I didn't want, or I just heard some bad news in the world, right? I flip that into curiosity. So, yes, thank you for sharing that. Is there another comment before we move on? Okay, great. So we're going to start with text in the way that I never do it, and I hate to do it this way, but there's just so much I have to throw it on the table. I hate to mention a text without studying a text, but I'm going to just put it on the sheet because I think these are a few of the biblical and Talmudic texts that ought to be some of the foundation we use to build a palace of truth above it. The beginning, of course, is, I say of course, but it's not obvious, is the great insight that humans are created in the image of God, and every person has infinite value. And based on that, the Talmud says, brachot, that human dignity overrides other prohibitions. Just like pikuach nefesh, saving life, overrides almost every Jewish prohibition except 3, so too, kavod habriot, human dignity, outweighs so many other things. Again, truth. Truth is really important, but kavod habriot can outweigh that. So then we go just one line past that to Genesis 1:28, and we say, fill the earth and subdue it. We start to learn that humans are given dominance. Now, to be clear, not every Jewish theologian is anthropocentric. Right? Not every Jewish philosopher thinks anthropocentrism is the path, that humans are the center and the pinnacle of existence, and everything is about us, and we can exploit the earth or the animal kingdom based upon our wishes. But that is the dominant view. The dominant view throughout the tradition is that basically subdue means humans have the right to exploit as they wish, as opposed to those who read it as responsibility, as guardians ultimately. So we go fast forward to Genesis 11. I skipped a lot in there, but to go to Migdal Bavel, the Tower of Babel, I think is a very relevant story to this moment. The question of, really, in the region, this great region we're in right now, I love this region, but this great region right now, which is the global leader of building. And the question is, what is it we're building? And why are we building what we're building? And who does this serve? And does this just serve, does it serve the wealthy? Does it serve the government? Does it serve human dignity? And who's in control of such conversations and regulations? Because the Tower of Babel was destroyed. Why was it destroyed? What was so bad about the Tower of Babel? Yes?
Why were they building it? To make a name for themselves.
So good. So the first reason you might say it's bad is that it was ego-driven. This was simply, they were trying to, overtake God or prove themselves, right? Why else might the Tower of Babel be bad? Well, you might say that what's bad about it is unity, right? Jews know unity is a bad thing, right? Unity alone has been horrific for Jews. In the name of universalism, when Jews stick out and are not part of the unified society, right, there's persecution against Jews. Jonathan Sachs wrote a book called Dignity of Difference, where he created a different paradigm, offering how, yes, unity is an important value next to a value of diversity. And how do you manage to build a society that celebrates diversity? Also, I was at an interfaith conference in Davos, and somebody stood up and very poetically said, all of our religions are really the same, and we should unite because we're really the same. And everybody clapped, and it was so beautiful. We're all the same. And I stood up and lost all my popularity and said, oh my gosh, I reject that idea vehemently, right? I want to celebrate our differences as religions. Yes, let's come together and respect each other and get to know each other, but let's be clear that these religions are different, right? And if we don't respect that, then violence will occur. And so I think the second problem with the Tower of Babel is that they united. But the third is, if humanity unites, what are we going to build? Are we going to build a hospital? Are we going to build a school? Are we going to build something beautiful? Or is the best we can do a tower, right? And if we put the best wealth and minds together to develop technologies, what's that going to ultimately build, right? What is it we're trying to build that's going to enhance human dignity, enhance the self-esteem of our children and their sense of truth and dignity, as opposed to destroying them? We'll get to that in a moment. Exodus 23:7, distance yourself from falsehood. Yes, although it sounds like I was diminishing the value of truth a number of times, it is very, very big value, emet, in the tradition. Leviticus 19:14, don't place a stumbling block before the blind. It's not actually clear if there's a blind person and you put a stumbling block that you've violated that verse. I mean, that's a bad thing to do. Nobody should do that. But the verse really is understood as being complicit in enabling someone else to do wrong, ultimately. If you go just 2 verses later, this becomes very relevant in the era of social media, of Lashon Hara and Shmirat HaLashon, guarding ethical speech and how we talk about people. In Bava Metzia, in the Talmud, it equates publicly embarrassing someone to shedding blood, akin to murder, right? Like what we share, we're going to get to an amazing source in just a few minutes. What time did we start this? Oh, I do? Okay, good. An amazing source we're going to explore around what questions do I have to ask myself before I share something? Okay, and then Devarim, building a guardrail around a roof. If something could be dangerous, like what are the laws on gun regulation to ensure that dangerous objects aren't misused? What are the laws around automobiles so that there's less car accidents? Is it, by the way, going back to questions of freedom, Will it be in the coming decade that we will require people to be in self-driving cars because of the astronomically lower number of accidents that will occur? People will push back in the name of freedom. Maybe even some of us here will push back against that. But will we celebrate the value of freedom? I want to drive my own car, or celebrate saving life because self-driving cars will save countless lives? These are the kinds of debates that will happen. And so too, what are the guardrails around how we use the social media to protect lives, literally lives, from suicide or other types of violence? Actually, let me say something about that in the name of anti-Semitism. You know, when anything happens, Jews in the news, Jews feel a combination of shpilkas and nachas, right? Shpilkas, we're like, oh, we're so nervous. What do they think about the Jews, you know? And the nachas, we're like, we're proud. There's a Jew involved, right? And so too with a lot of these technologies, I think the same thing is kind of happening. But the ADL released a report recently on how different I don't even know what to call them exactly, but different platforms that have the capacity through AI to generate new content can create in seconds anti-Semitic videos that look real. Anti-Semitic content which appeals real. You know, a Jew comes by and just steals something and runs and hits somebody, and the video goes viral. Like, oh my gosh, I've never met a Jew before. This is who they are? And they gave a ranking, the ADL gave rankings to these platforms. Claude got an 80, like the score 80 out of 100. ChatGPT got a 57. This is just through the realm of anti-Semitism and hate. Sorry? Oh, 100 out of 100 means that's the best. Yeah. No. It has. Thank you for clarifying. It has the best regulations to ensure untruthful, hateful content doesn't get released. Claude scored the best at an 80%. ChatGPT at 57. DeepSeek got a 50. Gemini got a 49. Llama a 31. And Grok got a 21. Now, just to be clear, it might sound like, oh, so Claude's the best, right? 80. And ChatGPT got second, 57. 80 is called a B-, right? Now, maybe B- was a grade you liked. Maybe you weren't happy if you got a B-, right? But that's the highest, is Claude. ChatGPT second, woo, ChatGPT, 57. That's called an F. That's an F. Grok is a 21. So the atrocious things that are being created that actually divide our society more and lead to hate and biases and very dangerous things. And thankfully, there are some agencies that are advocating for regulations on this, but the freedom of speech is pretty important too. And that's one of the debates that's happening. There's major debates around attacks on freedom of speech and protections of freedom of speech and how that plays out. And of course, we know hate speech should not be protected, right? But who's in control of what's ultimately created and what can be regulated? All right, so then Bava Kama on the sheet is the law of damages, and Grama is the prohibition that deals with indirect causation. I once heard somebody argue that so in the Talmud, anything you do indirectly, you're less liable for. So like somebody argued if you shoot a gun, it's actually grama because you didn't actually touch the person, right? You're hitting a trigger which pulls it. Yeah. So, these ideas can be perverted in such ways too, right? So too here, the damages being indirect is one of the arguments that often gets used. So let's talk about the healthy side of it. Rest from technology. And here I advise this not as a rabbi trying to promote Jewish observance, but as a human caring about humans flourishing, that if there's anything we embrace on Shabbat, maybe even more important than challah and Shabbat candles and kiddush, is for some period of time turning off devices, right? I think I would love this to be how Shabbat impacts the whole world, right? A day of the week where we could, or even just a few hours where we turn off devices and unplug. In fact, there was a whole campaign, I think it even emerged from this area, around unplugging. All right, let's turn to the backside. Jonathan Haidt has written many important books. He is an atheist Jew who teaches at NYU, and he wrote this important book called The Anxious Generation. Anybody read it? Okay, we have, about 5 people. All right, so I just want to pull a few quotes to give you a taste for what's going on here. We have overprotected children in the real world while underprotecting them in the virtual world. The great thing about having a protective spouse is that you feel like you could be less protective. So right now, like half hour ago, my 13-year-old daughter, who I mentioned earlier with the Vegas sign, landed on this DC trip. And for me, I'm like, this is great, go flourish. Like, I'll see you in a week, don't even have to call or text. My wife's like, I'm going in the suitcase. I'm going to be everywhere it happens, right? So, but he said, overprotected children in the real world while underprotecting them in the virtual world. And we struggle so much with that in our house, of what can be watched and used and how much freedom to give. A phone-based childhood is not what human beings evolved for. We replaced play-based childhood with phone-based childhood, and we're only beginning to understand the consequences. So he looks at the pandemic, the epidemic of anxiety and what that's doing to young people and just how much these devices have to do with it. And to be clear, there's a great video, I wish I could share the link with you. I hope it's not hard to find. But he says, not all social media platforms are the same. We can't just write them off. Like TikTok and X and Facebook and Instagram and all these are very different. Interesting enough, I have problems with TikTok based on China and other factors, but he says much less bad than Instagram in terms for girls. Girls are being destroyed on Instagram in many ways. And so, anyways, so this is one of the conversations I hope we'll emerge into, is to how do we both teach our kids responsibly to use technology while also protecting them at times where they will be addicted and hurt by it. Now, okay, so all right, comments or questions or pushback before I go to our Talmudic text here. Okay, let's go to Shabbat, the Tractate of Shabbat. Can somebody read this for us? If you have a loud voice. Great, please. Can we give him a mic? Let's give him a mic. Does this mic work? Shalom, shalom. Good. I'm going to cut you off a few times, by the way.
Okay.
So go ahead.
The Gemara relates that this resulted due to an incident that took place when Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon were sitting, and Yehuda, son of converts, sat beside them. Rabbi Yehuda opened and said, "How pleasant are the actions of this nation, the Romans, as they established marketplaces, established bridges, and established bathhouses."
Good, I'm going to pause you there. Oh, you're such a good reader. No, you're going to keep going. You don't have to sit down. But so they're debating. We live in a Roman society. Now, Roman society was tons of Jews, maybe 8 to 10 million, right? More than America. It's the closest thing to perhaps to Jews being in America now. I mean, just enormous assimilation into Roman advancements. As I discussed with some other groups, Jews were both in the crowds of gladiator fights cheering, and Jews were slaves in the gladiator arena fighting. In fact, one of the sages in the Talmud, Reish Lakish, was a gladiator himself. And so they're debating now, is this good? Just like American Jews do. It's actually funny because you used to be able to say liberal Jews kind of celebrated America and traditional Jews rejected it, right? Like Orthodox Jews who don't want to go to college or don't want to have relationships outside of their circles. But part of the Orthodox assimilation into evangelical America in the last decade actually is a little bit of a changing of that situation, an embrace of a certain America, an American conservatism in the country, just like liberal Jews have embraced Protestantism in certain regards. So the first view here of Rabbi Yehuda is, how amazing is Rome? They created these amazing businesses and these bridges and these bathhouses. We love this. The Jews, we love Rome. All right, keep going.
Rabbi Yossi was silent.
Okay, Rabbi Yossi was silent. That may be political, that he's scared to speak, or it may be that he is unsure, or he's mixed. Now, the Talmud says, shtika kahoda'ah. Silence is like acquiescence, which means nothing is apolitical, right? And if someone says, we're not going to talk politics, that's also a political choice, right? Because not speaking about something is also political. Shtika kahoda'ah. Okay, all right, just a moment. All right, so keep going. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, known as the Rashbi.
Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai responded and said, "Everything that they established only for their own purposes. They established marketplaces to place prostitutes in them, bathhouses to pamper themselves, and bridges to collect taxes from all who pass over them."
Great, keep going.
Yehuda, son of converts, went and related their statements to his household, and those statements continued to spread until they were heard by the monarchy. They ruled and said, "Yehuda, who elevated the Roman regime, shall be elevated and appointed as head of the sages, the head of the speakers in every place. Yossi, who remains silent, shall be exiled from his home in Judea as punishment and sent to the city of Tzipori in the Galilee. And Shimon, who denounced the government, shall be killed."
All right, let's hear for our great reader. Amazing reader. Thank you so much. That was so beautifully done. And so here we see the three results. One gets celebrated because he celebrated the Roman society. One is silent, and there's, the result there. And then the Rashbi, this is where, right after here is the Rashbi's cave. Rashbi has to go hide in the cave, and he lives there for a bunch of years, and it's an amazing story, which is beyond the scope of now, what we discuss now. But that's traditionally where we say the Zohar emerges from, in this cave of hiding of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, because the Romans are going to kill him. And this has become relevant now for how I use social media. As someone who's involved in immigrant rights and is very involved in feeding people who are in hiding from ICE, and someone who's bought whistles to hand out so people can blow whistles if ICE is there to warn people. I have debated, do I put this on social media, because they're trying to pass legislation in my state that says if you blow the whistle, it's a felony. If you do anything to prevent the capture of immigrants or prevent ICE's work. And so I'm in this moment of Rashbi, of like, do I speak the truth that I think is true morally around how Judaism informs my view of moral protections for undocumented people, or do I stay silent? Like Rabbi Yossi, or like Rabbi Yehuda. How do we speak to the authorities when you're afraid of the authorities at a certain time like this? And so I think more and more we're going to see social media is being used by the current administration to find people. What have people said, and to be targeted in that way. And so we're now at a very interesting moment about how we relate to American society. In many cases, going back to that Pirkei Avot, America is great and America is perfect. And America is the best of the melting pot of what could be achieved. And now we're in moments on both sides of the aisle where people feel something is going terribly wrong on the other side, or maybe even on their own side, if they're honest. On the other side and a little bit on my side too. So yes, first you had a comment, and then we'll go to you. Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to say that silent here by Rabbi Yossi in Pirkei Avot says, "Siyag l'chokhmah."
Yes, good. Thank you for that. That there's a good side to silence also. That this is the whole pathway to wisdom. The most wise are people who know how to be silent. So I made it sound like silence is something to put down. Yes, there's two sides to that. One side is that the wisest people are people who embrace silence regularly and consistently and speak little and do much, it says in Pirkei Avot. But the other side of it is, in our moral responsibility, when are we silent when we should not be? Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Is this a criticism of converts?
There is a long strand of thought in Judaism that is skeptical of converts.
And this then celebrates orthodoxy.
How so?
Well, it says that you can't trust anybody outside of your community. You can't trust people who come into your community from the outside.
Yeah, so one could come to that conclusion based on that. And I do think that the way denominations relate to converts are very different. The radical welcoming and inclusivity that emerges in the Reform world is very different from segments of the Orthodox world. Chabad does not convert. Syria will not accept any converts, Syrian Jews. And then there's just a whole rigorous grilling of many years involved in Orthodox conversion. And yes, there is this skepticism of converts throughout history. However, there's also a celebration throughout history. So there's kind of two tracks running parallel. Yeah.
Yeah, I also picked up on Yehuda, but I flashed a Kamsa Bar Kamsa here. I actually thought I misunderstood that there's Rabbi Yehuda and then suddenly he was elevated. So like the confusion with the names feels intentional, that is it Rabbi Yehuda, is it the other Yehuda, saying what? And I wonder if you can speak into that with the idea of like tracing what is being said, especially on social media, and how careful we have to be with source, and is it even possible to
Right.
be accurate?
Right, yes. And going back to caring, do we even care anymore for the source? And do that work in interrogation? Or do we just want it to spit the answer we want? I just want to elevate your good question rather than attempt to answer it. Let's take two more comments, then we'll move on. Yes, first here, yeah.
So there's a fourth place on this continuum that's not discussed,
Great.
which is maybe won't be relevant to Roman times, but I think is really relevant today, which is couching your criticism as a question or choosing your words really carefully to make people more open-minded to what you're saying. And in my life, that's something I have to do a lot. If I spoke as bluntly as I'm capable of,
Right.
I turn a whole lot of people off. Just ask my spouse.
Yes.
But if I make my words carefully,
Yes.
if I ask it as a question,
Yes.
I might be open to what I'm saying.
Yes, thank you. The art of question asking is an art to be cultivated and a skill to be cultivated these days. Not everything has to be a rebuke, but merely asking provocative questions in ways that people can really listen and engage and talk. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Part of the thing is what you choose to say. Now, in this thing, they didn't have to say son of converts. And as soon as they chose to say son of converts, then you got this reaction to that this man reacted to.
Yeah.
And so, also going back to what Ellen said, that alternate facts are not wrong. That's what the whole Talmud is about. This rabbi has using this set of facts, and this one is using that set of facts. Neither of them are wrong. They are just choosing which pieces of information they're going to share and discuss.
Okay, very interesting. Yes, very interesting points. And there is I mentioned Rachel Lakish earlier, who's the gladiator fighter. There's an incredible Talmudic story, which we're not going to discuss now, but essentially his death is caused, the story suggests, and his teacher's death is caused by his teacher reminding him of his past, of being kind of a bandit. And part of what emerges there is the prohibition against reminding someone of their past. In fact, calling someone a convert is deemed to be a prohibition in some of the Jewish literature. Because the idea was they were leaving something hideous for something beautiful. Of course, that's not always the case. But by calling someone of a convert, you're labeling them as an outsider and reminding them of a certain past. And so we don't call someone the son of convert. So it's an interesting commentary you both made on this passage. Yeah.
The other thing that stood out to me here, too, is relevant to our times. And I don't know Hebrew, so I can't pretend to know the exact kind of connotations here. But it occurs to me that, like, truth is not something that is always immediately divined accurately the first time. And that the search for truth is a process and not sort of a leap to an end.
Great.
And the difference here, that this incident, as it says here, took place when they were sitting, right? Suggests like an expectation of privacy. And then someone went and told thereafter, and sort of things became known to those who could act with power. And there's the requirement for a human chain of relation there that kind of exposes what might have been an internal conversation that could have led to a greater debate and pursuit of truth, versus someone saying something and that being identified with them as their permanent outcome. It's something that technology has accelerated and enabled at an incredible scale in a way that I think is like really important to still on.
Yes, yes. Take the most private of acts, sexual intimacy. where now sometimes that's recorded and distributed and going viral to masses, and people can't get it erased. They break up with their partner, and their partner posts these videos. So yeah, this whole realm of the public and private and the intimate and non-intimate is kind of, those boundaries are shifting. Yes, all right, 2 more comments, and then we got to get to this amazing source. Yeah.
It suggests to me what you had mentioned earlier about absolutism versus relativism, that and it gets used in a way that's not necessarily appropriate. So Yehuda's comment, which is stated, makes it feel absolute, and then the government solidifies that and punishes for that, or elevates him for that. Whereas, who's the last person?
Shimon.
Shimon, who makes a comment back which suggests relativism. Well, wait a minute, there's another way to look at this. Have you thought about that, to give a back and forth, and yet that gets punished? So it sort of, the story is solidifying absolutism of truth, which is never the case. And, you know, I'm in medicine, and what we suggest to people 20 years ago, we now say, don't do that, that's terrible for you. And so this is always an evolution, and yet society, I think Caleb's right, I think technology ends up solidifying absolutism rather than helping us understand relativism.
Okay, very interesting. All right. I know there's a number of other comments. Oh, yeah, fine. Let's take one more back there, and then we'll go on. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah.
So I find this really interesting about asking questions and the process of finding truth. I think that something I've noticed a lot that is very frustrating to me in our society right now is that it's very disincentivized to ask questions and engage in the collective process that's necessary to get to a more fundamental truth or more truthier truth. And I think it's interesting, you know, how this discussion kind of it's, you know, how do we get that? How do we use technology? How do we use these, you know, if you really take a step back and look at AI, for example, it's actually amazing to have this resource where I don't have to read all of the books out there to be able to take that information and put it together and get to the next step of thinking about it all together. There's a tool that allows us to do this, and it could move us forward societally in a really beautiful way if we can get over this human tendency to cling to certainty over, you know, the comfort of certainty over the willingness and the vulnerability required to engage in the process of moving towards truth. So
great, awesome, thank you. I appreciate all those insights. And if I think one takeaway that I want us to encourage us to think about in this session is, in some ways, that's been one of my themes throughout my time here, is how do we all get more proximate? How do we all get closer to people and situations, as opposed to letting technology let us hide away and actually be divorced from reality around us? And actually, it's interesting. The word in Hebrew for cruelty is achzariyut. And within that is achzar. When cruelty occurs when somebody becomes like a stranger, achzar, right? That when we get to know someone and smell them and see them, our capacity for cruelty potentially goes down. And so how do we actually get closer to situations of truth and assessment, not just distant? Okay, let's go to the Chofetz Chaim, because I think this is a remarkable source here. Oh, here it comes. The Chofetz Chaim was Rabbi Yisrael Meir HaKohen, and he was, how to describe him? He was Haredi. He was ultra-Orthodox, but he was the best of them. He was the best of them because he was remarkably learned and humble, and there's many stories about that. And here he creates a model for a process, as we were just discussing. What is the process? Not just I got the truth, but what is the process towards the truth and articulating truth? So, okay, it's still coming around, I think, but I'm going to get started here, since we only have 10 minutes at most. If you see that one person has harmed another, such as theft or exploitation or harm, whether or not the victim is aware of the injury, or shame or causing pain or suffering with words, and you know with certainty that the stolen property has not been returned, or the damage has not been compensated, or that the assailant has not apologized to the victim, even if you are the only witness, you may tell other people so that they can help the victim and denigrate these bad deeds in everyone's eyes. However, take care that none of these 7 criteria be missing. Okay, so what's going on here? You want to be an advocate for justice and for truth and for peace. And so you think something is wrong in society, so you're going to speak out about it. And you're not just going to tell your friend over coffee. You're going to get on all your social media platforms and tell the world your view about how evil this person is or how wrong this is. Or maybe at the restaurant, they served you cold coffee, so you're going to give a bad Yelp review and say how rude or how dirty your Airbnb was, right? Whatever it was. Whatever you want to use technology for to express your view of a wrong that's been done. He says, okay, good. You should do that. You should speak truth. But do these 7 things first. Number 1, you have seen the incident yourself rather than through hearsay, unless you have later clarified that the matter is certainly so. Okay? So the thing you're talking about, you're positive it happened, right? You didn't just find some little blog post of someone you don't know that says this terrible thing happened. Oh, it must have happened. I read a blog. Number 2, you must be extremely careful not to immediately determine that this is in fact a case of theft, exploitation, harm. Rather, deliberate carefully over the matter and whether it's classified as theft or harm. That is to say, now it's not a gathering of facts. Are the facts true? It is a understanding definitions. Okay, I see the facts of that's occurred, but based upon the moral definitions of theft or harm, does that definitely fit in, right? Did the waiter do something that's reasonable? Did the Airbnb do something reasonable? Did the person that the media is saying did this horrible thing? Is that definitely a moral wrong that's been done? Number 3, you must initially confront the assailant using gentle language in hopes that you can affect her, and this will lead her to improve her ways, and only if she does not respond can you publicize what she's done to the victim, and if you know that this confrontation will not be accepted. Okay, so number 3 is you have to actually try to see if it can be rectified. Can the situation be fixed? Can it be changed before you just blast away? Number 4, you must not magnify the wrongdoing beyond what it actually is, right? You have to avoid any kind of hyperbolic language to make, as opposed to saying, this person did X, and here's my proof that they did X, and here's the definition of why X is morally wrong. Right? Say, this person's a robber, this person's a scoundrel, this person is, right? Make it sound like it's their entire character. Number 5, your goal must be rectifying the wrong and not, God forbid, entertainment at the stigma you're placing on the assailant, nor satisfying enmity that you already bear towards them. Right? So here's a question of cheshbon and nefesh, of self-accounting. When I'm posting this, am I doing this because I want likes on social media? Am I doing this because it feels good to release this information? Am I doing this for popularity or for catharsis? Or am I doing this because I'm really, really interested in the truth and I really want justice in the case? Number 6, if you can bring about the rectification of the wrong through other means, such that you would not need to spread the gossip about the assailant, then it is entirely forbidden to do so. And number 7, that the harm that will come to the assailant through the spreading of this knowledge not exceed the judgment that would have rendered had proper testimony been offered in a court. Right? That's to say, maybe there's a misdemeanor involved, right? But by destroying this person's reputation, you've destroyed their career and their family's financial security and a bunch of their friendships and maybe their marriage, whatever the case is. I think back to that case where everyone had so much fun posting pictures about the CEO who was hugging his, someone who worked at his company. And I found it so gross, the obsession with shaming these people, regardless how I felt about what was involved. And over we see cases like this of just this playful nature of just destroying people's lives. Sorry? Yeah, yes, exactly. Joy at people's downfall. people, a real, and we have to really do a psychological accounting of why we enjoy so much sometimes seeing people we don't like or people who have done things that are actually relatively commonly done in society, even if they're wrong, being totally destroyed and mocked. Okay, so this is the Chafetz Chaim, and he creates a system of saying, yes, speak truth to power, yes, promote justice, but you need to go through a process before you do that. What do you make of his criteria and his process, and which of these kind of maybe speak to you, which of these don't speak to you? Maybe just a comment or two, because I know we only have 2 or 3 minutes left. Yes, please.
I love it, but I want to know what the next part is. Does he say, and if you don't do these 7 steps, and you break these codes, this is what the consequence shall be? Or is it, and I'm thinking for these platforms here, do they say, listen, before you post, please do these 7 things, and if you break them, so what, sorry, you should have done the 7, but that's the way. Will that change society? Or if you break these 7, you are now
Right. So he is dealing for an audience where he assumes the category of Aveira is enough of a deterrent that doing wrong, doing sin, so to speak, will be enough, right? So he's not even going to try to persuade, here's what's going to happen to our society, or karma, it's going to come back to you, or he's just like, this is what's right and this is what's wrong, and he's writing for an audience that's compelling enough. But you're right, what's next in the book is a great question, and I don't remember. Yes. Okay, that's a great question. So rebuking your neighbor would be a slightly different category. So as you may recall, I put out these 4 spots on a spectrum of how I think we should engage with people when we disagree. And I'll lay that out again if you weren't there on Wednesday night. It feels like 3 months ago. But the first category is shalom, peace. That is to say, my father and I have deep political disagreements, but I choose shalom because I love my father, and I don't want to be in a fight over Passover or Thanksgiving about these disagreements, so I embrace peace with him, right? And that peace means we're not going to debate. The second place is called machloket. Now I'm in a relationship where we feel very comfortable debating, right? We both are seeking truth, and we both have a respect for each other. We're going to embrace machloket, debate, so that we can learn from each other and push back against each other, right? And it feels like an even playing field. The third space is called tochacha, or rebuke. Now I'm in a space where it's not even, I think you're wrong, but I think you're going to listen to me, so I'm going to privately rebuke you so that you can learn from the wrong thing you're doing. This is not a debate, but it's me issuing a rebuke. And the fourth is protest, where I am now not going to do it privately. I'm going to be out in the streets or outside your office or on social media, making my voice of protest heard. Unfortunately, many people only have one tool. They don't like confrontation, so they only take shalom. They're silent on everything. Or they're a protester, so they just scream at everyone about everything, right? But actually, all 4 of these really matter. Where in my life do I embrace the peace path? Where do I embrace debate? Where do I embrace private rebuke? And where do I embrace protest? And wow, I would love our communities to have these conversations about what fits into which category. And so I think over here, what we're largely dealing with is the category of protest. Because the laws around rebuke are very clear. Actually, they're not so clear because there's debate about them. But one side, for example, says you should only issue rebuke when the other person will hear it and be able to listen. And one side says no, for out of principle, right? That's the utilitarian side. The deontological side says no, you have a duty to issue rebuke even if you know they won't care, because you can't be silent, you have to issue it. So this is about protest, and when will we socially, loudly protest, and what criteria do we use? So friends, to sum up, where I think we've landed after all of this is that there are dozens of areas of ethics as it relates to technology, and they're all interesting, and there is this Pirkei Avot lens as to what to take in and what to release, and the primary question, as I opened up with, is do we care? Because it's very easy to just enjoy being consumers and consumer casually and loosely and buy whatever feels good and whatever I want and to let our kids use whatever they want and they'll kind of figure it out. But I really believe our kids and ourselves and our society will drown, and the Jews will drown, if we allow these things to not be regulated, both morally within our homes and also legislatively in society, as just showing the anti-Semitic levels and the other forms of hate towards other minorities and groups. But also in the pursuit of truth, how we digest political information. Just because we hate a political figure doesn't mean we should spread videos or mistruths because I'm just going to share everything that kind of fits with my view. I haven't fact-checked anything at all, right? We're also feeding into that same system. And to support a healthy democracy means that I think the basis of that is rebuilding our respect for truth. And that's not just the truth we like, but the process of the search for truth as well. So I give you all the bracha, and I hope you bless me back, that we leave today with a passionate commitment to think through the tools we use and the tools that we're not even using yet, and do in a way that not only elevates our moral reasoning, but also kedusha, holiness. That there's a realm of sanctity even outside the realm of good and evil as to how these tools enter our lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Shmuly. Thank you. Excellent. I just want to take a minute with Rabbi Feder's permission, since this is the last. We made it to the end of our 37-session marathon. Actually, it was 10. So Rabbi Shmuly did 7 public talks and 2 private talks since Wednesday. So first of all, let's give him a round of applause for the koach and the stamina. Yasher koach. I also want to thank Rebecca Schwartz, who behind the scenes and running off extra copies and making sure you're all checked in and dealing with Salesforce registrations and all the things. She's been giving out the frequent learner cards. Has anyone here been more than 3 times? I believe a bunch of you. Good job. Look at that. So March 19th, I believe, is a time to gather and just debrief and share and figure out how we want to bring these messages forward. Just big appreciation to all the synagogues who hosted. We also had our first secular space event in a wonderful wine bar, Rouge Lounge, which you should go back and support in San Carlos. And we do want to hear from you about speakers and topics as we go forward and we, in the next couple months, start thinking about what our next time will be. So please give us feedback, do your evaluations, donate to any of our organizations to keep this holy work going. And thank you so much, everybody.